Professor Wax. Calling Professor Wax. Okay, just trying to keep us all on time, and thank you very much. Brady, you ready to kick us off for our agenda item 9, which is the pilot project evaluation, and Brady's going to introduce Mike Warren and kind of give you an idea of what we're doing to evaluate what's going on out there. Evaluate the evaluators. Ready?
Thank you, Chairman Daffer, committee members. Caltrans and CH2M Hill continue to execute the evaluation plan in alignment with the overall project schedule. Caltrans remains the conduit of information exchange to keep that true independence that we all wanted in the evaluation. Mike Warren, Travis Dunn, and I meet weekly to coordinate all activities related to the evaluation. And today we have Mike Warren, project manager from CH2M Hill, here to share some updates on activities completed to date, upcoming activities, and initial pre-pilot survey results. I hope you find the information interesting, and I encourage you to ask questions. And so with no further ado, Mike Warren, project manager, CH2M Hill.
Welcome, Mike.
Oops. I did. I can evaluate the effectiveness of this mic stand. Good morning. Thank you for allowing us to present on the road charge pilot independent evaluation. So real quickly, we're going to go through what we've accomplished since the last TAC meeting, what we're going to accomplish leading up to the end of the year, and then we are going to present some of the results from our pre-pilot surveys that have been sent out. Hopefully many of you have completed. So activities completed. Project began February 11th. Since the last TAC meeting, we have conducted the data analysis planning workshop. We've completed our pre-pilot surveys. We started analyzing the pilot data, so the same data that the account managers are providing, they are also providing to us. Actually, D'Artagnan is providing that data to us for us to conduct our independent analysis against. So it's the same data that they're getting from the account managers, they're feeding to us to conduct our evaluation. The pre-pilot attitudinal surveys have closed. We're keeping the survey open for any late enrollees, but we're not providing any more reminders. The results of these surveys is what I'll be talking about shortly. And we are closing what we call the phase 2, the pre-pilot experiential surveys. So those are the questions that are based on what type of mileage reporting option you have chosen. So what's coming up? Late October, early November, we'll be doing the mid-pilot interviews. That's with the project delivery team, the interagency working group, and the account managers. We are also developing the statistical analysis methods report, which defines how we're actually doing all of the analysis, what types of analyses we're doing with all of this data to meet the evaluation criteria. We'll be providing the pre-pilot survey results report. Like I said, high-level points I'll be talking about momentarily. And then actually the time frame up here, time frame up here for the mid-pilot surveys is a month off. We're actually going to roll those mid-pilot surveys out October 10th. And those will go through at least the end of the month because of the Miles of Thanks sweepstakes. So, we're taking this in snapshots. So the snapshot that we have here, all the analysis that was conducted, the snapshot was taken on August 24th. I do have some updated information as of yesterday. So we have, as of August 24th, there were 3,191 surveys completed. As of today, that number is 3,528. Margin of error for 3191 was 1.73. We are now at 1.65. But what we have found is 65% of all survey takers are satisfied with the pilot program. Now this is pre-pilot, so keep in mind this is going to We expect these numbers to change. We hope these numbers will change over the course of the pilot. We want to be able to identify why they have changed. So, program satisfaction by gender. Again, using the 3191, there were 39% that were extremely satisfied or very satisfied. 28% were satisfied. So we're in the 60-ish percent, the high 60s for program satisfaction. Of those high 60s percent, 63% were women, and 66% of those satisfied were male. Again, we took the same thing through age range. We did 18 to 45, 46 to 65, and over 65. Again, 70% of those 18 to 45 were satisfied with the program. 62% between 46 and 65, and 61% over 65 were satisfied with the program results to date.
I'm sorry, it seems like there's a degree of less satisfaction with age. Any thoughts as to why?
Is that difference statistically significant?
It's not.
But what does dissatisfaction or satisfaction in this context actually mean?
It is a general question. What is are you overall satisfied with the pilot program?
Oh, I see. So there's no sense of what the basis for a sense of dissatisfaction means.
For that one question, you're absolutely right, yes. Now, there are additional questions that we asked that drill down, and then we're also, as part of the open enrollment period, for those that change mileage reporting options, we will be doing a trigger-based survey to determine the exact reason as to why. The other thing that we haven't been able to report on is we allowed participants to put in, just general text boxes. We put text boxes in our surveys for participants to tell us what they loved, what they hated. We've started that data mining exercise, to identify any keywords, but, to date, we don't have that information available.
Can I ask a favor? In the future, if you show this kind of visualization, can you turn the legend vertically so that it aligns with the plots here? I'm sort of mentally doing this rotation.
Sure.
And even better is I don't need a legend if you just write in those blocks what is which level of satisfaction.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
Oops. Okay, so we also took the overall satisfaction based on income level. This was the below median, at median, or above median. Again, 64%. We're rating program satisfaction 4 or 5, which is satisfied or very satisfied. Again, 64% in the median income and 66% in the upper income brackets. With race and ethnicity, we had 2,325 respondents that were Caucasian. 64% were satisfied or very satisfied. 221 respondents were Hispanic Latino. They were 72% satisfied or very satisfied. And 241 respondents were Asian Pacific Islander, and 65% were satisfied or very satisfied with the program. We broke it again down by regions. 65% in the northern region were satisfied, 62 in the central, 66 in the southern region, based on 1,447 respondents in the north, 438 in the central region, and 1,289 in the southern region. So we also subdivided this by urban and rural. There were 2,806 respondents that were categorized as urban, 375 in rural. Interesting note here, 65% were satisfied in urban areas, 64% were satisfied 65% of respondents in rural areas were satisfied. So, we were wondering if there was going to be a lot of dissatisfaction from those rural participants. What we found is there's not. They're just as satisfied or dissatisfied as their urban counterparts.
Can I make another request, please? Again, also in the future, it would help to know or to distinguish between differences that are statistically significant and those that aren't, so that if there are differences, we can ask questions about them.
Okay. Anything else?
I'm sure I can come up with things.
We were sitting pulling these together, and I'm like, you're going to be the one because this is data and results, and yeah.
This is what the RAND Corporation does, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So we then ask the questions, what specifically are you satisfied or dissatisfied with the program to date? 50% are satisfied with the ease. 48% the amount of time spent on participation. 45% are very satisfied with the clarity of the communications. 50%, and actually 76% if you include the 4 or 5 scores, are satisfied with their mileage reporting options. So it would be interesting to take this information and then correlate it to those that have swapped mileage reporting options during the open enrollment period. Only 40% were satisfied with security of their personal information, but 58% don't know. Again, pre-pilot, this was pre-pilot. They don't understand it. We do expect those numbers obviously to evolve between mid-pilot and end of pilot. So then we also asked what the respondents hope to learn from the pilot program. And what I found very interesting was that 86% considered understanding how road maintenance and repair are funded in California to be positive factors, to be a major factor.
If I could add on to that, our CEO received an email from a member about a week ago, and it was forwarded to me, and the person indicated that they were part of the pilot, and that they thought the Auto Club should be providing more information about how all the money works and where it goes and how it's being used. And so I called the person up, and a very thoughtful individual, and it's emblematic of I think the complexity in all of our transportation funding is such that the public has no idea. It gets back to Jim's points early on about people don't know how things are paid for, and I think that's a challenge for us all moving forward with this or any other significant change. Is there's a lot of unknowns and uncertainty. And that breeds doubt and suspicion, and it just makes it more challenging, and we all need to be aware of that.
Agreed. Yeah,
I'm sorry.
No, please.
Well, since you asked, I can offer a couple of other suggestions. One is that the rating scale of not a factor to a major factor has 3 as don't know, but I question the idea that if you don't care, that's the same as you don't know. And it would be, I think, important to make the 3 meaning it's not, 1 is it's not a factor, 5 is major. I don't think 3 means I don't know. I think it means I don't necessarily care. It's peculiar to me, I guess.
I would.
Feel free to push back.
I'm going to. I would think that if someone scores a 1, to me, that's a don't care.
But then why is, I see what you're saying.
So the survey questions, these are results from the survey questions. So we said, as part of the survey question, on a scale of 1 to 5, what do you hope to learn for each of these things? So this is based on the survey responses.
Sure. I guess I'm just asking a question about the design of the survey. Again, if I were to pick a 3 here, I would say it's somewhat of a factor, right? Not that I don't know, but it's, for example, if someone asked me, what do I hope to learn, or what is my opinion of privacy, and I might say, It's a bit of a factor. I would pick number 3. It's not at all a factor. It's not a major factor. It's in between. It's kind of a factor. It's not that I don't know. It's that I think I'm neither a 1 nor a 5. And it seems to me important to distinguish between people who don't, who have a sort of a middle ground opinion and those who don't know what their opinion should be.
That's fair.
Is not that I know what it should be.
All right, we good? Okay. What I found interesting with this one was there were 41% that 41% of the survey respondents didn't really care about how the program will ensure privacy protection and data security. The privacy concerns that we all originally thought were going to be major are, they're not as big a deal moving forward. Honestly, 71% of the respondents, and same percentage with the new numbers. They want to see if this program succeeds or fails. Any questions?
Well, just a comment. I mean, the sample's a little skewed, right? Because, these other people are actually enrolled in it. Presumably, there's a lot of people who were especially concerned about things like the privacy, security, and the information might well have chosen from the set at the start, I'm not going to be part of this. And you can't pick that up by looking at the respondents. So, I mean, that doesn't actually tell you anything as far as I'm concerned.
It is a control group. I mean, it is a controlled group of respondents. I believe Jack or Travis mentioned that there will be follow-ups for those that chose not to enroll in the pilot. Finding out why they chose not to enroll. And it'll be interesting to compare that information against what we have here.
I'm sorry, along those lines, I mean, and this may be beyond the scope of this effort, but it'd be interesting to compare on a few, not many, but a few critical questions, the general public. That's a wholly different set of people who, either never even heard of this, or if they heard of it, never took any step to engage or learn more.
Agreed. Anything else? All right, thank you.
Now we'll get into the fun stuff on how this actually works with electric vehicles. And Professor Doyle will give us his dissertation.
Thank you, Chairman Madaffer, members of the committee. Good afternoon now. We're moving from what people think to car talk. Moving into the question of what effect, if any, would a road charge have on the adoption of electric vehicles in California. And just by way of background, as you may remember, this question was raised, I'm sure more than once, but the first time we had it recorded was all the way back in June of 2015. And so, as we do with all inquiries made by the committee, we added it to the policy parking lot, both to come back to you with more information, but also for purposes of, you're thinking about what the outcomes are from the pilot, but also as CalSTA takes forward the information, including any policy analysis and what types of recommendations that it might make. The consulting team is researching this topic as well. So that's the genesis of the question. It also raises the issue, and I think maybe one or two of you raised it, is, well, even though the question is what would this do to the adoption of electric vehicles or plug-in electric vehicles, there's lots of other alternative fuel vehicles that might be having the same questions, including biodiesel. I know compressed natural gas was an interest of the committee. But for purposes of the research that we're doing, as well as the presentation today, we're really honing in on those vehicles that are targeted by the Advanced Clean Cars program. That's the California Air Resources Board's program to encourage the adoption of zero-emission vehicles. Zero-emission vehicles themselves literally have, they're actually a very narrow type of vehicle that they're talking about, and it does not include compressed natural gas or biodiesel. And we'll get into that in a minute. We're going to have a little bit of alphabet soup for lunch today because the way that the regulatory system has developed over the years, dating back to the 90s, is that the California Air Resources Board has classified vehicles based on their engine type and their emissions profile. So there's going to be a lot of acronyms thrown out, and we've tried to reduce them as much as possible. We'll hone in only on the ones that are important for purposes of the policy question. Okay, zero-emission vehicles under the statute are those vehicles that are driven only by an electric motor that are powered either by advanced technology batteries such as lithium-ion, the type that you would find in, the Tesla and the Volt, or rather the Leaf, or it also includes hydrogen fuel cell vehicles. And the chief characteristic, obviously, is that they have zero tailpipe emissions over their entire lifespan of the vehicle, not just for the first 2 years before they start burning oil. On the left, you'll see battery electric vehicles that are in the market, ones that are familiar to you, I'm sure. There's 11 of them currently for sale in the U.S. right now. These are 3 of the more popular ones, the Leaf, BMW's i3, and of course the Tesla, in this case the Model S. The hydrogen fuel cell vehicles, which is also qualifies as a ZEV under the California mandate, there are only 2 in the marketplace right now, at least available for purchase or lease, I guess, and that's the Hyundai Tucson fuel cell vehicle as well as the Toyota Mirai. The question as originally proposed was about plug-in vehicles. It wasn't just the ZEVs or the ones that you saw on the previous page. And this is where an acronym is actually important because under the ZEV regime, PHEVs, even though they're not a ZEV, they earn automakers partial credit. And so we're also looping this into the policy examination today. A PHEV, plug-in hybrid electric vehicle, combines 2 propulsion modes. It's an electric motor that's powered by the battery that can be recharged. So in other words, it's not the type of hybrid electric where it's recharged just from regenerative braking. And that's combined with the gas engine, and those are its modes of propulsion. They are categorized as super, ultra-low emission vehicles. And of course, their actual emissions profile depends on how often or how far you end up driving and whether your vehicle switches over into gas mode. The most common ones, of course, are the Chevy Volt, and then there are, Ford has put out a number of plug-in electric vehicles, PHEVs. The Ford C-Max and the Ford Fusion are both come in plug-in version. I just want to point out the ones on the right, the more exotic-looking ones. Automakers have recognized that electric motors and electric vehicle technology are not only beneficial for fuel savings, but for performance. And so some of these more exotic sports cars that you see, the Porsche Panamera, they use a PHEV engine. They get about 5.2 seconds to 60. That's fast. BMW uses PHEV engine in their, or PHEV technology in their i8 to get under 5. And then the McLaren, which is a super high performance sports car, costs $1.3 million. They use a PHEV technology also. And I think you can also go 2.8 seconds per 60 miles in a McLaren at $1.3 million, or you could buy a Tesla Model S and race, because that gets the same propulsion. Okay, for purposes of the mandate, obviously it's aimed towards vehicle emissions reduction. That's smog, soot, and then more recently, the regulations include GHG as in emissions. And what has happened is California, of course, led the nation in developing the zero-emission vehicle mandate and program. And under the Federal Clean Air Act, which you may remember from earlier presentations, other states can adopt the California Clean Air Standards. 9 other states have actually adopted California's ZEV program or ZEV standards, and they're shown in red there. So collectively, these 10 states, the Section 1077 states are often known as, They represent 28% of new auto sales in the U.S. Now, even though there are only two types of vehicles right now that are literally zero-emission vehicles, some other technology vehicles, quote-unquote, count towards meeting the ZEV mandate. So, very briefly, the ZEV mandate requires that the large auto manufacturers have new sales, they have to hit new sales figures. Right now, the current sales goal is 10%. It's been in effect for a while now, actually. But beginning in 2018, the scheme of credits that I'm going to describe in a minute will start to taper down, and the real goal, the longer-term goal, is 15% of new vehicle sales by 2025 must be zero-emission vehicles. So just to show you in a snapshot of how the current regime works, on the right, you'll see a bar chart with lots of colors. And right now, the bars to the left that have the multiple colors, the credit system for complying with the ZEV mandate gives credit to partial zero-emission vehicles. Basically, those are clean burning gas engines. That's the top color there. I think it's maroon, if I'm making that out right. And that credit, automakers' credit for producing very clean gas-burning vehicles, is phasing out. That's going to go away at the end of 2017. Similarly, the hybrid electric vehicles, think of a Prius, something that doesn't have an onboard battery, it doesn't plug in. Those also generate credits currently towards the 10% goal, but that's also going to be tapered down and eventually phased away, so that the only types of vehicles that will qualify are the zero-emission vehicles, that's the orange bar, and then plug-in hybrids. Even though they're technically not zero-emission, they're considered a transitional zero-emission vehicle. So, in numbers that you may hear in the press, or I don't know what kind of party you'd be at where people would be talking about this, but on the left, there is stated in more plain terms the number of new vehicle sales of these various types. Now, this is a forecast or a projection as to what must happen in the consumer market in order for California to be able to meet that 15% ZEV mandate by 2025. So that's the mandate, that's how it works. And the mandate is obviously on the supply side. It's a regulation that's intended to spur the development of these products, make them available to consumers, but there is also incentives, very strong incentives in California and some other states on the purchase side of it. Yeah, that's right. So if you look at the top of this slide, these are California's purchase incentives. Right now, there is a California Clean Vehicle Rebate Program. It provides an increasing amount of credit to buyers of PHEVs, battery electric vehicles, and fuel cell vehicles, and you can see the amounts are graduated. The more expensive and newer technologies you get more of a credit for. It was a very popular program, so much so that the demand for the credit exceeded the supply of money that the legislature had appropriated, because this program, the Clean Vehicle Rebate Program, is subject to legislative appropriations, and they had simply run out of money for the current time period, at least through June of 2016. And since then, the legislature has appropriated money to this program, I think in the neighborhood of $120 million, which not only will allow those consumers who purchase these vehicles, but the program ran out of money, so they got put on a waiting list, so that if the legislature renews the program, then they could capture their credit. And that's what happened. The legislature appropriated money.
Can I ask a question, please?
Sure.
Just, you wrote PEV at the top. Do you mean ZEV? What is the P in this case?
The P is plug-in electric vehicle.
Okay.
And that's intended to grab both the fully or automatic battery electric vehicle as well as the hybrid electric vehicle.
But
Thank
it
you.
includes fuel cell?
Fuel cell's not a plug-in, but under the regulatory regime, yeah, it does. So ZEV includes a fuel cell, but it's technically not a plug-in vehicle. Again, you can see the other types of incentives up there. There are special incentives for low-income households. There's also, as you probably know, a federal income tax credit of $7,500 on the purchase of battery electric vehicles, and the amount of your credit depends on how big your battery is. And then California has some other programs related mostly to the financing of the charging infrastructure, which is perceived to be a hurdle potentially to consumer adoption of electric vehicles. So they will provide residential PEV charging installation financing for you. I think it's under the same program that they provide for solar. Now, those are all at the purchase end, so the capital side of acquiring a PEV. There are also some policies that have been enacted in California. Some of them are at the municipal level, they're not at the state level, having to do with the actual use of your vehicle, which can also entice people to purchase. The one that's most probably well-known and very effective is access to the high occupancy vehicle lane, so the carpool lanes. It used to be that there was a yellow sticker, and a yellow sticker would allow a hybrid electric vehicle like the Prius, the one that does not plug in, to have access to the HOV lanes. But they had to curtail that program because it was highly popular, and obviously if you have too many people rushing into the HOV lanes, it defeats the purpose of keeping the traffic moving. In its place, they have two other programs. One is the green sticker or the green decal, and that's for the quote-unquote transitional ZEVs. Now again, we're getting back to alphabet soup. These are the plug-in hybrids, so think Chevy Volt, for example. They have maxed out the number of plug-in hybrid electrics that can have green stickers, and this in part is because some of the automakers produce plug-in vehicles that don't actually run on they don't have a very large electric range. The Toyota Prius that plugged in, you could get a green sticker, you could drive in the California HOV lane, but you only have 11 miles of all-electric range. After that, you then switch over to a conventional gas engine. So at any rate, California has maxed out the green decals, and in its place or in addition are the white decals. These are unlimited, and they are targeted at the zero-emission vehicles, the battery electric, and the fuel cell. And interestingly, CNG vehicles, and I'm not sure why that is.
Just was going to give you, Jeff, this is recent news, but the bill just passed, I think this past week, that for the green decals, the limit was lifted, but the expiration date of January 1st, 2019 stays in place. So that program is ongoing. People buy a plug-in Prius today, they may get a green sticker and use it through 2018.
Okay, latest news. Also, just as an illustration of how effective those policies are, if you were to purchase a vehicle, or better yet, if you were looking for a vehicle, say a plug-in hybrid like the Prius that was 11 miles of all-electric range, and one of them had a decal and one of them did not, the difference in offering price, the sale price, is it's over $3,000. And there was a study done, I believe it was by Berkeley, on this topic. UCLA, sorry. Go Bruins. Yes, showing that A, it's effective, and B, it's perhaps too effective. But yes, so $3,000 is the value of having a sticker and access. Now the price to actually acquire one of these stickers is $22. So that's what the consumer pays.
I just want to offer an observation. As somebody who is just now this month celebrating his third year driving an electric car, General Motors just announced about a week ago the projected EPA mileage range on their Chevy Bolt, which they've said is going to be $37,500, so $30,000 after that $7,500 federal income tax credit, and even less if you put in for the $2,500 state clean air vehicle rebate. But the thing that was amazing is that they pegged the EPA mileage at 238 miles range on a charge. I frankly think this is going to be a big game changer in the eyes of the public. And I will say this wherever I go, nothing is more liberating than leaving the house every day with a full tank of juice and never having to stop at a gas station. Now I do have, and it's in the pilot program, I have a Honda Odyssey minivan that I've had for over a decade now, and it's one of those things you just never get rid of them because it's great to haul the dogs to the beach or what have you. And I'll tell you what, the other day I went and got gas at Costco for the first time, probably in about 4 or 5 months, because I don't drive it that much. What a waste of time. I mean, I mean, I'll tell you what, the line, it might have been 5-10 minutes long, and then you get out, and you have to put the thing in, and you have to wait, and then, you know what? You get home at night, you plug that thing in, and you go in the house. You come out the next morning, and it's fully charged. And guess what? It charged starting at midnight, when the rates are cheapest. Anyway, I always like to give my commercial for the ease of electric cars. And I think once the public starts seeing this, I think you're going to see a huge shift over to much more, because it really gets down to busting that. The Leaf, that's what I drove for 6 months, had range anxiety. 80 miles on a charge just doesn't cut it. 238, that's huge.
Yeah.
That's huge. Pam?
And in places like my town, Santa Monica, where we have a lot of rental multifamily housing, though, the obstacles are how to get the charging infrastructure into residential.
Right.
So that's there are barriers and obstacles like that need to be overcome too. Because there are a lot of folks who would like to purchase it and take advantage of it, but they don't have the ability to plug it in to charge
Well,
it.
that's where that's just me. If I was a policymaker, and thank God I'm not up there in the legislature, but if I were, that's where they need to be focusing. And I know they did it in the rental market, so if you live in an apartment or a condo, the landlord can't stop you from putting in that infrastructure. But I think that's the next area that rebates and things are really going to be very helpful.
Yeah. Perhaps even workplace charging for those that don't have home. Some of the other incentives.
I'll call on you, sir, in a moment. Let him finish up.
Some of the other incentives that I think were just mentioned here, the utility rate discounts for off-peak charging, and that's in select service territories, but if you look at a California map, a vast majority of the population is covered. So plugging in at night, or even setting the dial on your car to plug itself or to charge itself while you're sleeping, you can take advantage of those off-peak rates. Free metered parking in certain municipalities, and then, as the chairman mentioned, plug-in electric vehicle charging stations, some of which, or many of which actually, are subsidized in terms of the cost to install the stations, and some of them, for a while anyway, are even no fee. You don't have to pay anything for the electricity.
Member of the public, you had a comment or a question?
Maybe a little bit technical, but I'm looking at page 6 there that you have, and I'm trying to figure out how the corporate average fuel efficiency standard that each car manufacturer must meet is affected by their selling, say, battery electric vehicles, which get a tremendous equivalent mileage, which would allow them to sell more low-mileage, high-profit pickup trucks. This has been a concern, and I haven't been able to get a good answer to this. You may understand how these two things work together.
Well, your description is plausible. For instance, the CAFE standards by 2025 are 54.5 miles per gallon. So, but that doesn't mean that every vehicle produced must have 54.5 miles per gallon. It means the total in your fleet. So when you have something like the Chevy Bolt, that's with a B, that has huge range and has an eMPG, which is or MPGE, basically you get credits for that in your fleet offering, and that enables you to sell things that get less than 54.5. So we can follow up with the committee if you desire.
That was my big fear, and that was my assumption. So when I did my efficiency, I had one CAFE requirement, and I said that CAFE requirement can only apply to internal cars. Then you have another requirement that some percentage of the cars you sell must be a battery electric vehicle. That's the only way I can figure out the way to do the math to work that problem. And it sounds like people are not grasping that. They believe that more electric cars will reduce greenhouse gas. It absolutely will not. As long as the automobile manufacturers are selling a fleet of cars and they want to maximize their profits, they will sell the low mileage, because their only responsibility is to meet that CAFE standard.
Okay, well, we can take a look and see how the ZEV standards, or at least the PEV sales, plug-in sales, are working in California. It's the highest in the U.S. California has, they are more, as of August, are more than half of the U.S. total sales of plug-in electric vehicles, about 224,000. So that's, of course, raw numbers, but even on a per capita basis, sure.
So that's 223,000 since 2011?
About 2011, that's
Okay.
right.
And what's the total auto sales in California during that time?
I don't know the answer in terms of sales, but in terms of percentage of it, actually the next, let's see if I have that in here. I don't think I have it in here. PEV sales are about 1.5% of total sales, so you know, over that cumulative time frame, that'd be about the factor. Yep. Okay, so on a per capita basis, California also leading, and by quite a large margin, 3.25 plug-in vehicles sold per 1,000 of population. Now, this is through 2014 numbers. I didn't have any more recent numbers. What I do want to mention here, because it's important as you start to think about, okay, is there anything in your view that would offset or that would help consumers purchase PEVs? Georgia is an outlier here. You'll notice that every state around it had very low adoption numbers. But they're at 1.54. And the reason they're at 1.54, or were, is because they had, in addition to the federal tax credit, they had a $5,000 point of sale PEV credit. So basically the total reduction in the purchase price of an electric vehicle in Georgia was $12,500. It was so lucrative, actually, and it was very effective, as you can see, but the legislature repealed it. And as of last month, they are reporting that sales of PEVs, once they took away the $5,000 incentive, dropped 90% in that state. So they're back to being sort of milk toast color like the rest of the states around them. They are thinking of reinstituting it, though, and it just shows you the power, you know, how important the upfront purchase price is to these buyers. Finally, then we'll move off of what's happening in California and talk about road charging. Sales of PEVs in California, they must be, I think as we showed in the previous slide, 15% by 2025. That's the extrapolation of that complex ZEV mandate. And here's basically what the curve has to look like. There has to be a lot of uplift to the tune of 250% increase year over year in sales of ZEVs, sorry, by 2025 in order to hit that number. Okay, so the real question for you...
And so what's the state strategy to get to 265,000 per year from, what is it, about 30,000 now?
It's closer to almost 50. It's not quite 50 yet, 40, in the 40s, I believe.
Okay.
Well,
So to increase it by more than 200,000 a year, what's the state strategy to do that?
well, I think if we, unless there's other strategies that are under consideration, again, it's these on this slide, it's the purchase incentive, so it's the regulatory side of increasing the supply and the purchase incentives, which are, you know, tax credits and potentially use incentives. I'm not aware of anything more than that.
And if I can just answer Lauren's question a little bit also, there was legislation considered late in the session this year that would have given unclear and substantial new authority to the California Resources Board to try to do that, amongst other things. And it sort of fell away relatively quickly, but it is something that people are thinking about. Unclear if some additional strategies will be used.
Well, I think it'll be important for the question that's before us to compare. Basically, the road charge is a small, regular, ongoing charge, and the benefits that they're attempting to have are all, and you said the most effective one are up front. They're very large up front, or their use, which are not cash. I mean, they're monetizable, but they're not they're not cash. And so we're talking about very different,
Yes.
these are very different things.
Yeah, and some of the things that policymakers struggle with is whether it's better to incentivize the purchase, capital acquisition, similar to what you might find in a utilities sector where they might have a rebate program for fuel-efficient, windows or something like that, or whether you want to somehow incentivize the use, whether it's by the rate that you would pay or parking or something else, free charging. So the question then is, why do people purchase PEVs? And fortunately, here's the reasons stated, and then we'll look at some statistics on this. Energy independence, I think that was mentioned earlier, just being able to avoid the gas station entirely, reducing environmental impacts, obviously. Early adopters, there's a surprising number of people that don't mind paying the price premium to be the first to have a new vehicle technology. Also, the vehicle performance, I think there's unquestionably quieter, smoother, quicker. Driving benefits, those are the use benefits, some of which we talked about. And then we get down to the financial benefits. There's the capital cost reduction, being able to take advantage of $7,500 off, courtesy of the federal government, in addition to whatever the state might offer by way of rebates or sales tax incentives. And then finally, what we're going to talk about and hone in on is the operating cost. That a big factor for a lot of drivers is the lower cost of fuel and maintenance. So that's what we're going to look at. Here's what the drivers said in California. This is a survey of PEV purchasers, and it's sponsored, if you will, by CARB, but through the Center for Sustainable Energy, which administers that vehicle rebate program. So these are 19,000 Californians that have been asked these questions. And here, what is your reason, what is your main reason for purchasing PEVs? It varies a little bit. Some of these responses vary based on the type of vehicle that they purchased, but not some is that saving money on fuel costs is 38%. I say 38 because the weighted average of the top and the bottom bar, the green and the blue, 35 and 42 is 38 in the survey results. So 38% of Californians that bought PEVs said that their primary reason was saving money on fuel costs. So here is a comparison, just to give you some metrics in a sense of what those fuel cost savings might be. This has been, again, produced by CARB, the Air Resources Board. And the key assumptions here, this was basically about a year ago. So the cost of gasoline for this vehicle, it got 26 mpg, which is about the standard mpg of a new vehicle, not the California fleet, but a new vehicle. Compared to both a battery electric, and we'll just call it the Leaf, or a plug-in hybrid, we'll say it's the Volt, and based on 3 different assumptions about what time of day those drivers might plug in. And you can see that just in fuel cost savings, if you had a battery electric vehicle and you plugged in during off-peak or nighttime hours, you would save, under this scenario, about $106 per month, assuming you drove 1,000 miles a month. So what we're going to do now, though, is look at this in a little bit more detail, layering in a potential road charge, again, just at the rate that's been modeled for the pilot. We're just using 1.8 cents. Here again are 2 vehicles. You'll notice similar. We're not comparing a Tesla. Again, we're trying to find similar performing vehicles that also have the MPG characteristics of new vehicles. So we have the Volkswagen Golf and the Nissan Leaf. And what you will find is that, again, this is what you saw on the previous screen. Under those assumptions, $3.63 a gallon versus 10 cents per kilowatt hour, you would save $106 a month. If you added the road charge, the California road charge at 1.8 cents, yes, it does eat into your cost advantage, but it eats into it by about $18 a month, so you save $92 a month. So a lot of times, especially I think some people will say that they think that if you were to tax for miles driven, that eliminates the cost savings that they would have. Why would they even buy an electric vehicle? And this is just a way of doing the math to show that even if you had a road charge of 1.8 cents per mile, you're still way ahead, at least in operating costs.
I'll just add one more thing you don't have on the chart, and that's the saving of time. Little calculation here. I have saved at least 48 hours of my life not having to go to a gas station. And then how about all the times I get to drive in the HOV lane by myself or not have to wait because it's an electric car. It's an amazing, there's a number of other areas.
But you
My,
have to-
my wife would say that it was because I was too cheap and the gas, but at the
You
end
have
of the
to
day,
wash
that's a
those
side-
windows once in a while.
Yeah, that's right.
Now, the illustration that I just gave was, those fuel prices aren't today's fuel prices. So what we've done here is that we've modeled today's fuel prices, which are, I don't want to say, they're not historically low, but they're comparatively low. It's $2.63 a gallon. Happens to be exactly $1 a gallon less than what was modeled. And now we've also assumed that the plug-in vehicle driver is not all that aware of off-peak charging and the rate differential. They just plug in whenever. So we took the average residential electricity rate for that driver, the absent-minded driver, and it did reduce significantly the cost savings advantage, but there's still, even under those circumstances, an operating cost savings or a fuel cost savings of $41 a month. When you layer in a road charge, yes, that eats away at it a little bit more, so that the cost savings now is $28 per month. And now, let's see, what happened there? Okay, so now we're comparing the more likely scenario of today's gas prices versus someone that buys an electric vehicle. That's that 38th percentile that cares about the operating costs. They are going to plug in off-peak, and with a road charge, they're still saving $54 per month. So those are the metrics for you. And then there's one final one I want to put up here just for illustrative purposes, and that is the maintenance costs. So if you think of the things that you would have to replace in a vehicle, what you don't have to replace in an electric vehicle is oil. You don't have to have your oil changed. Timing belts, vehicle emissions equipment. So there's been studies done, I think this one was by CARB also, that it's been amortized, but once you calculate in the vehicle maintenance costs, regular maintenance costs, there's a savings of about $73 per month, even with the road charge. Okay, so where does that leave us? Unfortunately, there's a shortage of directly relevant information on the topic in terms of how those cost differences are going to affect purchase behavior. The limited information that is available tends to be commissioned work by the automakers, and they don't release that. I'm not sure how accurate it is, because I think if you talk to them, they'll often scratch their head, not in frustration that the modeling and the studies, what people say they're going to do isn't actually how they behave when it comes to purchase decisions. There is some research on the topic that's been proposed at both the federal level and the state level, but what we're going to do just quickly in the last couple minutes here is look at ancillary information, let you draw inferences and make your own judgments about whether a road charge would be a barrier to PEV adoption. The first data point is gas prices. Now, if you think of gas prices and the fluctuations that people see at the pump and that they pay every day, that's their operating cost. When that fluctuates, what happens to PEV sales? Does it matter? And now this is dated information still. It's only back to 2014. But what you can see is that the adoption rate, or at least in the numbers of vehicles sold, continues to climb even with fluctuations in gas prices. An interesting thing I just read yesterday I want to share with you. The August numbers are out for PEV sales, and hybrid so we have $2.63 a gallon, and yet year-over-year numbers are PEV sales in August were up 65% over last year when gas was actually $1 higher. Okay, another, sure.
The blue is month over month, right? It's each month's average?
Actually quarters, but yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, each quarter's average.
Yeah.
Is the brown line each quarter's sales?
Correct, and that's
Okay.
not cumulative.
Okay, that's what I was wondering.
Yeah,
Thank
it's
you.
a little bit confusing, but the dip down there, as you're hinted, is probably not cumulative.
But I guess, can we go back
Sure.
for a moment? I guess this isn't entirely convincing that there is no relationship between fuel price and vehicle sales, because what we want to ask is what would vehicle sales have been had fuel, well, essentially there's also a lag between when prices change and when people buy their vehicles. Totally fine if this is the best available data, but can we really make inferences about whether there is elasticity with respect to fuel prices and vehicle sales or not?
This is the part where the automakers scratch their heads. There is some evidence that consumers are aware, but like you said, it lags a surprising, it's not that surprising because a vehicle is a major purchase. You don't just on a whim decide to go buy a vehicle. But there is some correlation, but the effect of it on PEV sales at least is surprisingly low. I think as I mentioned, we're $1 less per gallon than we were last August, yet sales are up 65%. Okay, this one is, if you thought the last one was maybe not a great nexus, this one's a little bit worse, but it's interesting because here we're looking at the price of gas and how much drivers drive. Now, driving is rather inelastic. You have to drive when you have to drive, sometimes regardless of what the price of gasoline is. But this is from the U.S. Energy Information Administration. I thought that their conclusion was interesting because it strongly stated that gas prices have little impact on historical per capita VMT. Now that is a big inferential leap to say that people's driving behavior is going to be the same as their car purchasing behavior because one is discretionary, the other not so much. Again, we're trying...
That's trying to see the... Is the average gas price, are those in real dollars or are those? My guess is they're.
I think that I don't know. I think that those are. I don't know. I don't want to guess. Mr. K.
Okay, then I can't ask my question.
But you can ask it and I'll answer it later.
If they're not in real dollars, then it's kind of hard to make the comparison because per capita VMT is not inflation adjusted.
That's true.
It's just a behavior.
Okay, so it is nominal.
Okay, so there's a little bit of apples and oranges involved here.
I would also add that I think in a lot of other analysis, a much greater predictor of vehicle miles traveled is economic performance and employment, much more so than gasoline prices.
Yes. So I think we can conclude this is very weak in terms of whether or not it's going to, if it's any indicator as to how people might behave when it comes to purchasing a PEV. Okay, so there are some other opportunities to get more information and insights that are more on point than what we could cobble together in the last two slides there. One is your road charge will be gathering participant feedback, and I confirmed with the evaluation team that they will be able to have some insights into how PEV owners react to a potential road charge. The other is that there are pilot tests that have now been funded in other states. Those will be underway probably in the next 12 to 18 months, and those other states are going to be looking at this same question. The third is that some of those pilots, and perhaps even in California, you have PEV user groups, maybe that's not the right term, associations or organizations, and reaching out to them is helpful. I know some other states that have done that, and they're able to understand better what the potential impact is of a road charge. And then finally, and this definitely is UCLA, I looked it up, there is an active study underway by the university looking at what are the adoption factors for zero-emission vehicles, what matters to consumers. So main conclusions, PEV adoption, obviously critical to California's Advanced Clean Cars program, 15% of new sales by 2025. California has both purchase and use incentives in its suite of policy tools. 38% of the buyers think that the operating cost savings is important, so that's you've got to keep that in mind when you consider a road charge. Although the cost advantage varies based on the gas price, on average, the PEV owners who know to plug in when it's off-peak charging can save a lot of money, $106 per month, if they're to switch from a new gas-powered vehicle to, say, a Nissan Leaf. Operating cost advantage does come down when you have a road charge, from 106 to 92. And PEV sales do not appear to be strongly reactive to gas prices. And then the question for you is whether a 1.8 cent road charge would significantly or meaningfully impair PEV sales. That's an open question and something we'll look forward to seeing how the committee figures it out. Okay, thank you for your time.
Can I,
Yeah, any more questions?
well, I have a comment. I mean, you, your last point is right. It's an unanswered question, but what your presentation suggests to me is that it's not so much about whether, well, I think it's great to see that the road charge does not substantially change the cost calculus, right? And it seems to me that the bigger than question is to make, whether it impairs PEV sales, I think will depend much more on whether people are aware of what that cost is and whether, how much uncertainty they feel is associated with it. In that, is it $18 a month, but a year from now it'll be $60 a month, right? So I think the answer to this question may lie much more in consumer education than the actual financial impact.
I would agree.
Another point worth mentioning, the University of Michigan, there's a researcher named Sivak who puts out a newsletter monthly on the average miles per gallon of the whole fleet of new cars that was purchased in that month and the price of gasoline in that month. And he can establish quite clearly that there is a long-term relationship which enables you to predict the miles per gallon of the newly purchased vehicles as a function of the price of gasoline. The issue here is that, of course, there are many increasingly fuel-efficient vehicles that are not PEVs.
Right.
And they are much larger in number. So the implication of that is that the kinds of incentives that are used can affect the mix between more fuel-efficient internal combustion engines and PEVs. And there is a relationship between fuel economy and fuel price.
That's it.
And I think that's important, especially because fuel economy affects the revenue that we need for the highway program, which is the motivation for what we're doing here.
That's a very good distinction. Yeah, the motivations for PEV buyers are different than they may be for other fuel-efficient vehicles.
Other questions?
Thank you very much.
Anything else? No. Thank you very much, Professor. I like to call him Professor because he's always so analytical and everything. All right, well, I'll tell you, the electrical vehicle adoption issues are definitely something that is important for us as we look at this, the pros and the cons. At this point, let's go to Mitch on item 11, and he's going to talk to us about our, we've got somebody from the public who would like to raise. You can come forward to the podium, sir, please.
Okay.
And again, state your name for the record, so we have that.
Yeah, I'm Mike Bullock from Oceanside, and I really appreciated that discussion. There was a lot there. I would point out that we've lived with corporate average fuel efficiency standards for a long time, and if somebody were to describe that, 50 years ago, or to someone who had not heard of it, they would think that was pretty darn heavy-handed of the government. And when we go out and buy a car, we walk into a dealer and we look at the cars that are there, what we see is heavily impacted by the corporate average fuel efficiency standards. And it was a contentious political issue. It always has been. And, when I did my report showing the requirements that would be necessary for cars and light-duty trucks to support a climate-stabilizing target, the CAFE standard was key, and it only went to 2025. So as any systems engineer, I just made up values from 2025 to 2030. But the most important thing is we have to go to battery electric vehicles quite rapidly if we want our cars to support climate stabilization. And that is the largest category of greenhouse gas emissions. And I think a little bit listening to the discussion here is that we're sort of living in an alternate universe almost. Jerry Brown was a Jesuit priest, our governor, wanted to be a Jesuit. When he was young, that was his
Okay,
ambition
you need to
in life.
Stay on topic.
Okay.
Thank you.
So he says to the Pope, he says, first of all, he says it's maybe too late. And I think hopefully we understand what that comment is. Then he says, humanity must reverse course or face extinction. And that was not an exaggeration. That's actually what we are facing here. And so, you are the technical advisory committee, and I'm asking you to kind of push a little bit on your scope, perhaps. You know, I talked about the need for pricing and payout system. You know, it's not just a road use charge, it's a road use charge pricing and payout system. And that might be a stretch, but I'm asking you to please go there. Please consider that. And then what are the characteristics? And one of them has to be full cost pricing. That's kind of the elephant in the room. We're going to have to do full cost pricing for a lot of reasons. We don't want to see bridges collapse. And you know, that's a tough thing to sell politically. And this is the Transportation Commission sub-body. This is tied up with politics. And you need to, and politics isn't a dirty word, that's policy. What kind of policy can save us? What is reverse course? You know, that's what system engineering has to zero in on. How fast what is the turn radius of this reverse course or face extinction?
Give us a closing sentence, please.
So I'm just asking you to be bold. You're not alone. As I've shown in here, the California Democratic Party has a platform where they have said work for equitable and environmentally sound road operations. So do you believe that? I mean, that's what I'm asking for. I'm asking for a report which goes into those kind of issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Michael. And we will certainly have plenty of opportunity as we go to this next item, and Mitch is going to talk to us about our schedule for the coming year. Mitch.
What I have in your agenda is a proposed schedule for next calendar year. Rather than meeting quarterly, we tried to take a look at what might be some of the key things that were happening and when. So what we've got proposed is meeting in April, which would be an opportunity to hear about the closeout of the pilot, maybe some preliminary findings from the pilot, final participation survey information, and get a status on the report that agency will be preparing. Then the next month in May, hopefully, we'd be able to get the final report on the independent evaluation, an update on the FAST Act, and I think related, what would be the next steps for the TAC in relation to the FAST Act programs that the state's doing. And if there is a draft of a report that can be made public, it'd be an opportunity to discuss that. A July meeting where we'd hope to have the report from agency, and then a meeting in December to discuss what would be in the CTC's report to the legislature.
Okay, any questions?
Just one comment that as the pilot ends and as the report is well underway, certainly if there are needs to adjust this schedule based on work being done sooner or later or whatever, other things come up, I think we'll all be flexible to that and would appreciate that. Great.
Yeah, absolutely. I think we're going to have to look at, you know, to Brian Annis's point earlier in that of the edict from the governor. I mean, you know, never agreed to do this thing till after he told me it was a tough sell, but we had to do it. And then when he said he was going to speed up the schedule, we do need to be flexible, as Steve mentioned. And, you know, clearly what's going to come along from this will undoubtedly be some sort of legislative proposal. One of the things that, although not in our wheelhouse legislatively, but is something that at least myself, along with Executive Director Branson and others from the CTC and frankly with Caltrans and working with the Secretary's office, want to start thinking about what would a legislative framework look like as this thing moves forward. Because let's face it, we can write the report to to CalStat, and then CTC gives the report to the legislature. But somebody is going to have to take this thing and run with it to at least create the framework. And I would rather have this group at least have some bullet points as to what we think needs to be included in that. So as we look to the 2017 schedule, that's some of what we need to be looking at. And I think there's not a better group than this Technical Advisory Committee that has developed the expertise and the knowledge as to this heavy lift and how we have to be mindful, and we've heard it more than once, this thing is going to happen in pieces. It's going to happen over time, and we need to come up with that strategy. Professor?
I have a question. At the end of 2015, we effectively, quote, wrote a report. It was actually staff, of course, who wrote the report, but we were engaged in actual, wordsmithing.
Absolutely.
As we look forward to the next year, there's an independent contractor, there's a requirement of that CTC report to the legislature. Will we, as a technical advisory committee, be, quote, writing a report, or will we be commenting on the outcome of the reports others prepare?
More the latter, but the commenting is crucial to what gets included in the report. I mean, and again, I leave it to this task force. If this task force wants to issue some important bullet points or things that it believes are important, that's the will of this group. We operate by consensus here. So if you all have things that you believe should be included, or at least would it be an appendix, if you will, or a part of the report, I think those are things that are important as well.
And
You're going to be called on by the legislature. You're going to be called on by folks as experts as this thing moves forward. So it's better to not ignore your opinions, but instead to include them, I believe, now in this process.
Jim, I think your guidance and leadership is good on this point. I appreciate that very much. We have a certain charge based on the legislation, but I think we have an opportunity also.
And a responsibility.
And responsibility. And certainly to the extent we have a consensus viewpoint that can be included as comments or otherwise, that's most useful. There may be some other side comments that different parties might need to make as well. And I think that's all going to be constructive towards the process and to whatever next steps may come.
Yeah, I just fast forward, and many of you have been involved in the legislative process. With all due respect to the 120 elected state legislators, they don't have this expertise that you've developed. A lot of them don't even understand what the gas tax is all about. Some of them don't understand how critical infrastructure funding is right now and how bad it really is. And so I think it's important to, and probably few realize the fact that as this CAFE standard continues to increase, revenues tied to gasoline tax will continue to drop. Those are important issues that we need to be thinking about. Siri even agrees, so we're all good.
Siri wants to get out of here.
No, I tell you.
No. What I was checking was actually El Paso, Texas is closer than Calhoun City is.
Wow.
I gotta pass on El Paso. I know. I was saying, which was closer? 845 miles.
Well, when we kind of walked through the dry run on this meeting, I figured we'd adjourn by 1 o'clock, and that is the time that we hit. Is there any other comments from members of the Technical Advisory Committee? Parking lot issues, do you have something, Mitch? I don't recall that we added anything other than this discussion we were just having.
I have a list of a few things.
Oh, boy. All right, here we go.
Well,
Ladies and gentlemen, any time that this meeting continues on past 1, we'll credit Mitch Weiss. Go ahead.
okay, we'll make it quick. Letter to the LAO. There
that's
was the question about making sure we know how lessons learned from a voluntary environment would translate to what we might recommend for a mandatory environment. Lessons from Oregon in converting that same thing from theoretical to actual payments, and then identifying differences that are statistically significant. And lastly, to mention, if you have not signed up for the road charge pilot, I believe we have some mileage meters.
We have
There you
mileage.
go, right here. It's a one-stop
So who in here,
shop.
raise your hand if you're on the tech, if you're not in the program. All right, Nidhi? Then please, we'll get you a plug-in device and you can be part of it. And frankly, anybody else in the audience, I would be very open to having anybody participate as long as supplies last, while supplies last. Yeah, while supplies last. All right, we're good. No other public comment. With that, this meeting here in San Diego is adjourned.